and welcome to NTD News. I'm Jasmina Davis. Here are today's top stories. Republicans highlight challenges and achievements in racial equality at the RNC. The president's son calls what happened to George Floyd a disgrace, but calls officers American heroes. Two U.S. representatives from both sides of the aisle introduced a resolution to condemn conspiracy theory QAnon. This comes as reports continue to spur Trump, and other Republican officials talk about it. Riots erupt for the second night in a row in Kenosha, Wisconsin. Property is set ablaze, and the governor says he's increasing the National Guard there. 3 people have officially been infected with the CCP virus a second time. A Hong Kong expert warns people not to think that if they beat it, they will have lifelong immunity. A Chinese drug lord is sanctioned by the United States. The State Department says he shipped disguised packages of fentanyl onto American shores. And a peculiar TV commercial has been circulating in China for weeks. It advertises an urgent need for 100 beautiful Uyghur brides to be married to Chinese men. But what's the motive behind it? Speakers at Day 2 of the Republican National Convention highlighted the progress the U.S. has made in racial equality. They recognized the tragic challenges the country has faced, and they acknowledged the breakthroughs the U.S. continues to make to become a more fair nation for all of its citizens. Our reporter Kevin Hogan has more.
Welcome to the 2020 Republican National Convention.
The main speakers on the first night of the Republican National Convention touched on difficulties they've experienced based on their race. Senator Tim Scott's grandfather never learned to read or write and was forced out of a segregated school in 3rd grade to pick cotton to support his family.
Yet, he lived long enough to see his grandson become the first African American to be elected to both the United States House and the United States Senate in the history of this country. Our family went from cotton to Congress in one lifetime. And that's why I believe the next American century can be better than the last.
And hate.
The former South Carolina governor and UN Ambassador Nikki Haley is a daughter of 2 Indian immigrants. She says she faced discrimination and hardship growing up in the U.S., but her parents never gave in to grievance or hatred. They worked their way to success. She says she takes it personally when people call America racist.
In much of the Democratic Party, it's now fashionable to say that America is racist. That is a lie. America is not a racist country.
Haley recalled the shooting of 9 African Americans by the white supremacist at the Mother Emanuel Church in Charleston, South Carolina in 2015. She said that shooting didn't turn blacks and whites against each other, but instead brought them together, and they made the tough choices needed to heal.
What happened then should give us hope now. America isn't perfect, but the principles we hold dear are perfect. If there's one thing I've learned, it's that even on our worst day, we are blessed to live in America.
Donald Trump Jr. said what happened to George Floyd was a disgrace, but he affirmed that police are American heroes. He said all Americans should be able to live without fear of violence in their homes and communities.
All men and women are created equal and must be treated equally under the law. That's why we must put an end to racism, and we must ensure that any police officer who abuses their powers is held accountable.
In 2017, a leftist gunman shot Republican Representative Steve Scalise for his beliefs. He says the left wants to defund the police, which he says he takes personally because the police saved his life. He says President Trump stands with the brave men and women of law enforcement. Kevin Hogan, NTD News.
More buildings and property were set ablaze during another night of rioting in Kenosha, Wisconsin. NTD's Miguel Moreno has more on that and an update on the police-related shooting.
A second wave of riots hit Kenosha, Wisconsin last night. More buildings and cars were torched in an apparent response to the police shooting of Jacob Blake. He was shot multiple times by a cop on Sunday after he appeared to resist the officer and went to enter his car. Another video of the incident emerged today. Milwaukee's county executive is questioning what really happened.
And I do know that the Wisconsin Department of Justice is doing a thorough investigation. But when you look at the 15, 16 seconds of that video, And you see the officers literally guns out, guns drawn, following him into that vehicle. For me, it lets me, one, the question is how was he a threat? Because he wasn't shot before he got into the vehicle. And what was said during that whole time?
Blake's uncle urged people to protest peacefully, but according to videos and on-the-ground reporters, that wasn't the outcome. The Kenosha Professional Police Association asked people to not jump the gun and wait for the investigation to be completed. They said the video that's circulating doesn't capture the complexity of the incident. Miguel Moreno, NTD News.
Earlier today, Wisconsin's governor said he'll ramp up security by increasing the presence of the National Guard. That's as businesses are getting prepared for another night of rioting, looting, and arson. NTD's Phil Zoe spoke at the leader of a local nonprofit. She and her team are trying to stop more damage to local businesses.
Businesses in Kenosha, Wisconsin are preparing for another night of chaos as the recent riots left many shop owners devastated. We spoke to Alex Robinson, director of downtown Kenosha. She says some buildings are still on fire.
Right now in Uptown, there's still buildings on fire, unfortunately. I think the fire damage from last night's activities have been the worst in the city.
Alex is gathering 400 volunteers to board up shops and protect them from more vandalism.
Our small businesses really took a hit for vandalism. We had about 30 businesses that were kind of trashed and looted, completely taken out, like a lingerie store. There was a Boost Mobile store that was completely looted.
She says the local community has been amazing by showing support via donations, cleaning supplies, and food. But more riots are expected to come and help is still needed.
We're still in need of a lot of help and aid to come from funding and from materials to get these people safe.
Alex hopes the police and National Guard will help ease the situation for businesses. In the meantime, her team will be prepared for the unexpected. She says she looks forward to being able to rebuild the community. Phil Zoe, NTD News.
Tonight marks the second day of the RNC. First Lady Melania Trump is getting to give a speech at the newly renovated White House Rose Garden later tonight. Melania Trump is set to address the Republican convention on its second night. The theme is Land of Opportunity. She will give the keynote speech in front of a small audience and will be following strict guidelines set out by COVID-19 advisors. Chief of Staff to the First Lady, Stephanie Grisham, gave a brief overview of what to expect from the First Lady's speech.
It's very uplifting. It's very positive. It reflects on her time as First Lady and some of her favorite moments. There's a couple moments in there that I think will be really key.
Grisham said the First Lady would also delve into future plans for her Be Best campaign and went on to say,
and then it's really, really forward-looking and to not only what she wants to do in the next 4 years, but why she thinks the president is best for our country.
Grisham noted the White House was implementing very strict measures, preventing use of government equipment and requiring any preparation be done outside of employees' professional time. This is to make sure the appearances are in compliance with the Hatch Act, which prohibits government employees from engaging in political activities while on duty. In addition, Secretary of State Mike Pompeo will give his remarks from Jerusalem tonight. He is there as a part of a 5-day Middle East tour. The State Department noted Pompeo would be delivering his speech in a personal capacity, that no staff was involved in preparing the remarks, and no taxpayer funds would be used. Other speakers for tonight include President Trump's son, Eric Trump. His daughter, Tiffany Trump, will also be making a rare public appearance. Acting Secretary for Homeland Security, Chad Wolf will keep his position if Trump is reelected this term. Trump announced his nomination today.
Chad Wolf is nearing his first year as the acting secretary. Wolf has been faced with overseeing federal agents' operations in cities with ongoing riots like Portland. Trump expressed his support for Wolf when he announced his plan to nominate him, writing in a tweet, "Chad has done an outstanding job and we greatly appreciate his service." Wolf responded saying he is honored to be nominated by the president, adding that right now his job is more important than ever at a time when, quote, "the homeland faces evolving threats from natural disasters, violent opportunists, malign cyber actors, and transnational criminal organizations. The Department of Homeland Security hasn't had a permanent secretary since April 2019, when Christian Nielsen resigned. Earlier this month, Wolf's role in the DHS was scrutinized by the congressional watchdog. The watchdog says that both Chad Wolf and Kenneth Cuccinelli are not eligible to take their positions because the administration didn't follow federal succession laws. But the watchdog's opinion is not legally binding. With the Senate dominated by Republicans, confirming Wolf's nomination is likely to be smooth.
2 U.S. representatives, 1 Republican and 1 Democrat, introduced a resolution to condemning the QAnon conspiracy theory. The move comes as reporters continue to drill Trump, the First Lady, and other GOP members to give their opinions about the theory.
QAnon is considered a conspiracy theory. It alleges Trump is working to expose and arrest a cabal of pedophiles among the elite that run governments and institutions. Representative Tom Malinowski, a Democrat from New Jersey, and Denver Riggleman, a Republican from Virginia, say it's time for Congress to completely reject QAnon. Malinowski writing in a tweet that the theory is a dangerous anti-Semitic conspiracy-mongering cult that the FBI says is radicalizing Americans to violence. An Illinois Republican representative is urging Americans and others in his party to condemn QAnon.
I think conspiracy theories are going to be the thing that destroys this country in the long term because it undermines faith in government.
The First Lady's chief of staff says that she hasn't talked to the First Lady specifically about it, but added it's safe to say that if there's anything that's harmful to children, the First Lady would oppose it. Last week, reporters at the White House asked Trump for his opinion about QAnon.
At the crux of the theory is this belief that you are secretly saving the world from this satanic cult of pedophiles and cannibals. Does that sound like something you are behind?
Well, I haven't heard that, but is that supposed to be a bad thing or a good thing? I mean, if I can help save
Trump says he doesn't know much about it, but that the people who support QAnon, quote, love our country. Melina Weiskup, NTD News.
The Justice Department today sanctioned a Chinese chemist who they called one of the most significant drug traffickers in the world. According to the department, Zhang Taotao sent fentanyl to the U.S. in disguised packages to slip past authorities. The department also sanctioned Ali Rise Technology Group, a company in Hong Kong. This company is said to have either been owned, controlled, or operated by Taotao. Under these sanctions, they're barred from trading with the U.S. in any way. The United States is working to improve relations between Arab countries and Israel. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo is currently in the region visiting 4 countries to gain support for Israel. U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo landed in Sudan on Tuesday after flying nonstop from Israel. He said it was the first official direct flight between the 2 countries. Pompeo met Sudan's prime minister and the head of its ruling council during a brief stopover in Khartoum. They discussed U.S. support for the civilian-led government and deepening of the Sudan-Israel relationship. Ties with Israel are a sensitive issue in Sudan. The country was among the hardline Muslim foes of Israel under former Islamist leader Omar al-Bashir. The U.S. has been restoring its own ties with Sudan. In April 2019, al-Bashir was overthrown. Sudan is pushing to be removed from the list of countries that Washington considers state sponsors of terrorism. It doesn't look like Sudan and Israel ties will be solid in the near future. Just a week ago, Sudan announced it had fired its foreign ministry spokesman because he called the UAE decision to normalize relations with Israel a brave and bold step. Pompeo will also visit the United Arab Emirates and Bahrain during his trip. Up next, the Gulf Coast dodges disaster as Marco is downgraded to a post-tropical cyclone, but Hurricane Laura is looming. She's already killed 9 people. Phone scammers are posing as contact tracers to steal financial information. An identity theft expert gives his analysis on the dangers of faked contact tracers. And parents in New York City are uncertain about sending their kids back to school. They are having a hard time with their children being at home, but don't want to put anyone in danger by sending them to school. Find out more when we return. The Gulf Coast dodged Marco's wrath. The National Hurricane Center downgraded the storm to a post-tropical cyclone and predicts it will be dissipated by this afternoon. But the coast is now facing a much bigger threat. Hurricane Laura is approaching, and it could be a Category 3 storm in the next day. It is expected to make landfall along the Louisiana and Texas coastlines. Some parts of the Gulf Coast are already under a hurricane watch. Storm surge and tropical storm watches and warnings are also in effect. As a tropical storm, Laura has already killed at least 9 people in the Caribbean. If a test is positive for the virus, you're expected to answer questions from a local contact tracer over the phone. But if you're not careful, you might actually be talking to a phone scammer. NTD's Don Tran spoke with an identity theft expert about scammers posing as contact tracers to steal personal information.
To contain the virus pandemic, contact tracers have been reaching out to infected people, asking them for information about whom they've recently been in touch with. The purpose is to monitor the virus's spread. Health officials consider it very important, but the practice has been taken advantage of by phone scammers. Chief Security Architect of Protect Now, Robert Siciliano, said these scammers pose as contact tracers to gain the victim's trust.
And this confidence crime is to make the victim confident that the person on the other end of the phone is who they say they are. And as long as that scammer comes off as being notable and confident in their delivery, then the scam is set.
According to the U.S. Attorney General office in Montana, the scammers may ask for your social security number or your bank account information. They might also charge you for the fake contact tracing. Siciliano said the goal of containing the virus's spread makes it more likely for people to talk.
At this given point in time, the entire world is engaged in a predatory virus. And when there is a solution on the horizon, be that a vaccine or a contact tracer, essentially, if you can provide information that will alleviate the problem, people are more willing to give up their sensitive information as a result.
In New York, state officials threatened fines of $2,000 a day to a group who refused to cooperate with contact tracers. Threatening people with legal consequences is a scare tactic used by scammers. Siciliano said to hang up if this happens.
They will threaten with lawsuits. They'll threaten with arrests. They'll threaten with fines. They'll threaten with some type of a loss of your freedoms. And the moment that you feel your blood pressure going up or there's some type of fear or threats involved here, then simply hang up.
Siciliano also said to call a government-issued phone number to determine if the call was real or fake. Don Tran, NTD News.
Parents in New York City don't want to put anyone in danger by sending their kids back to schools too early. But at the same time, they are experiencing real hardships while their children are stuck at home. It's still not clear if children will return to school in New York on September 10th. Some New York City parents say this is the strangest back-to-school season they've ever seen. The mother of a 3.5-year-old said at this time of the year, they would normally be getting to know the way to school and be looking forward to meeting her teachers and her classmates. Those things are not yet happening this year, but according to her, there are bigger problems with children not going to school.
The most challenging thing about remote learning is that there's no free time for parents to do the work that they need to do, the work that we're paid to do and the work that we are meant to do.
She added that she will not send her daughter to school if the teachers are unhappy. She wants to wait until everyone feels safe. Another father of a 4-year-old said that he would like his daughter to experience a social scene.
I really want to make sure that she gets the experience of going to school and socialize with other kids, because that's the thing that's missing now during the pandemic period.
More than that, he doesn't want to send his daughter to school if it puts his pregnant wife at risk. Big U.S. store chains also feel the impact of children not going to school. Walmart, Kohl's, and Target all reported that this year's back-to-school season has been choppy, slow, and uncertain. But people are still shopping for some back-to-school supplies.
The consumer, the student, both high school and college, are staying home and they're doing Zoom calls. So they don't want that denim. They want things that look like this, that are fashionable, yet comfortable.
The back-to-school season is the second second most important one for retailers. Target announced it would extend back-to-school deals and offerings. Up next, a Chinese TV commercial is broadcasting an urgent need for 100 beautiful brides. But not just any brides, Uyghur women meant to marry Chinese men. And the word China may conjure images of bustling cities like Shanghai and Beijing. But a political campaign reveals the country's striking level of poverty. That and more after the break. A Chinese TV commercial has sparked debate amid weeks of circulation. It says there's an urgent need for 100 beautiful brides. That's Uyghur brides for Chinese men. Those that participate will be rewarded. NTD's Tiffany Meyer brings us more.
A TV commercial filmed not in Chinese but in the Uyghur ethnic group's native language is calling for 100 Uyghur brides to marry Han Chinese males. It's an answer to the Chinese Communist Party's call for promoting ethnic unity. Human rights activists say the purpose is to eradicate Uyghur culture. The commercial has been circulating for weeks, advertising an urgent need for 100 beautiful brides. The commercial begins with a show of gratitude for the CCP, which the commercial says has given the Uyghur people a good life. It then urges Uyghurs to support the CCP's goal of increasing Uyghur Han marriages for the purpose of so-called promoting national and ethnic unity. The commercial adds that viewers are welcome to introduce your friends and family, and even states that those who agree to the marriages will be rewarded with large sums of money. The 30-second commercial first appeared on Douyin, the Chinese version of TikTok, but it was soon deleted after overseas Uyghur human rights activists launched a campaign against it. Later, the activists posted the video on Facebook and Twitter to spread the word. They say the video makes Beijing's goals clear to eradicate the unique Uyghur culture. The CCP's promotion of marriage between Uyghurs and Han Chinese people also surfaced back in August 2014. A local government sector in Xinjiang gave incentives to interracial families. Among the benefits were annual bonuses of around $1,500, free education, and favorable employment and residency treatment for the couple's parents and children. When introducing the incentives, the former local CCP chairman said it was to promote positive energy. China's 2000 and 2010 national population census show that Xinjiang has the lowest rate of interracial marriages among ethnic minorities. The FBI is warning corporate America about the risks of doing business with the Chinese regime. A new report details the threats and ways to counter the communist regime on the home front. It also exposes how the Chinese regime has been stealing U.S. tech secrets from businesses to universities. The Chinese regime State Council has stated the 4 steps China uses to gain a technological edge over other countries. The steps are introducing foreign tech knowledge to China, understanding the materials used, assimilating that knowledge by reverse engineering it, and finally re-innovating that knowledge to develop what it calls new state-of-the-art technology. To do that, China targets U.S. businesses and their employees through academic exchanges and state-sponsored spying. The FBI advises companies to monitor and secure the local area network, saying it's the top vector for insider threat exploitation. That's followed by physical and remote access. Each year, the Chinese regime costs the U.S. $200 to $600 billion in stolen trade secrets, counterfeit goods, and pirated software. The FBI warns that the CCP does not play by the same rules. That's because its goal is to equal or surpass the U.S. as a global superpower. The CCP wants to influence the world with a value system shaped by undemocratic authoritarian ideals. While U.S. businesses labor under the assumption of mutual benefit, the Chinese regime does not. Instead, it takes advantage of every opportunity to develop and maintain a strategic economic edge. The FBI also warns of China's Made in China 2025 plan. In it, China aims to produce 70% of components in 10 domestic Chinese industries, greatly reducing reliance on foreign-made goods by 2025. Some ways American companies can protect themselves include developing a security strategy, taking precautions on foreign travel, and monitoring foreigner visits, as well as malicious cyber activity. The FBI adds that security violations or cyber intrusions should always be reported to the company's security office or local FBI office, saying when in doubt, report the incident, but never to the person under suspicion.
Chinese leader Xi Jinping has 3 months left to lift the entire country of China out of poverty. That's to fulfill an order he made 5 years ago. In trying to achieve this, local officials took some radical measures. NTD's Juliet Song reports. A former Chinese state official says China should hold off calling itself a well-off society this year. But failing to realize this goal would be a big blow to the Chinese leader Xi Jinping, as he has been pushing for it for the past 5 years. In 2015, Xi urged officials nationwide to be sure to bring all Chinese people out of poverty by the end of 2020. Now there are 3 months left until the deadline, but almost half of the Chinese population is still making less than $150 a month on average. China is the world's second largest economy right now, but it also has one of the world's highest income inequality. Officials who fail to lift locals out of poverty face setbacks in careers. To meet the quota, some took to extreme measures. That's according to a report from Bitter Winter, a magazine on human rights in China. In 2019, in China's central Henan province, a woman in her 90s hung herself in her house. Her neighbor told Bitter Winter that, the day before, local officials forced the woman to move out of her home. They did that so they can meet the quota of poverty alleviation. The woman said she had no place to go. The officials also forced 25 other seniors out of their homes. A farmer from China's Hebei province told Bitter Winter her story. She said the Chinese regime's anti-poverty policy has driven them to the point of selling their blood to sustain their lives. One of the standards for lifting someone out of poverty is that they must have a proper home. To meet the quota, she said local officials forced her family to move from their own shelter to a new home. But the new home was not livable as it had no doors or windows. Local authorities refused to pay for these expenses, and so they had to borrow over $4,000 to renovate the house. At that time, they didn't even have money for food. As a last resort, her sick husband went to sell his blood for money. She told Bitter Winter, crying, "We can barely sustain our basic lives, and the government is forcing us to our death. I know extracting blood is bad for our health, but we have no other means to sustain our lives." The authorities put up a notice in her home saying that she was provided over $2,000 in subsidies. The woman said she didn't get a penny. China's state mouthpiece People's Daily published an article this Tuesday boasting how authorities successfully lifted people out of poverty in a village in southern Guangxi. But the report also reveals the village's striking poverty. Until 2018, locals didn't have tap water. Just this year, villagers were able to get bathrooms inside their homes. A local elementary school didn't even have blackboards, so they used the stone walls after painting it with cement and ink. In March, Xi Jinping said the goal of lifting the rural population out of poverty has to be realized in time, and there's no retreat or flexibility. Juliet Song, NTD News. A Texas engineering professor who also worked with NASA has been arrested for hiding his ties to China. His NASA contract prohibited him from collaborating with China or any Chinese company or university.
A Texas A&M University professor has been arrested and charged for concealing his ties to China while working for NASA. Engineering professor Chung Jong-dong was arrested on August 23rd and charged with conspiracy, wire fraud, and making false statements. Prosecutors allege that Chung purposely hid his ties to Chinese state-backed organizations while leading a NASA research team that received a grant from the organization. The Justice Department says that under NASA's grant terms, he was not allowed to work with Chinese institutions. Prosecutors say Chung had access to NASA resources related to the International Space Station and leveraged that to advance his standing at a Chinese university. According to prosecutors, he participated in 2 Chinese talent plans and also applied for the 1,000 Talents plan at a university in Hefei. The DOJ complaint says Chung lied to both his university and NASA about these connections. US officials have warned that programs like these incentivize foreign researchers to transfer technology and information to China. Chung faces a maximum sentence of 30 years in prison if found guilty on all 3 charges.
Up next, new home sales hit a 13-year high. Low mortgage rates and movement to less populated areas have kept sales strong. And in a decade-old trade dispute between the U.S. and Canada over lumber trade, the World Trade Organization is siding with Canada. It's saying the U.S. made a mistake claiming the country is subsidizing its lumber industry, but the U.S. disagrees. Find out more after the break. New single-family home sales rose to the highest rate in over 13 years in July. The housing market continues to show strong immunity to the virus crisis. The Commerce Department said new home sales rose nearly 14% to a seasonally adjusted annual rate of over 900,000 units. It's the highest level since December 2006. Record low interest rates and a migration to low-density residential areas are driving the increase. And 340,000 fewer mortgages were past due in July. That's 9% less than June. But seriously delinquent mortgages of over 90 days rose by 376,000. The median price of a new home sold in July increased to over 330,000. That's up over 7% from last year. The United States has denounced an unfavorable ruling from the World Trade Organization. It's over a long-standing dispute with Canada over lumber imports.
The WTO said in a Monday ruling that the U.S. Commerce Department incorrectly calculated the level of Canadian government subsidies on softwood lumber exports to the United States. The Trump administration relied on the Commerce Department calculations to set tariffs of around 18% on Canadian lumber. U.S. Trade Representative Robert Lighthizer said WTO applied an erroneous interpretation that would shield what he called Canada's massive lumber subsidies from countervailing duties by the United States. Countervailing duties are tariffs imposed under WTO rules to neutralize the negative impacts of subsidies by other countries. Canadian authorities hailed the WTO decision. Its Minister of International Trade said the ruling confirms that U.S. duties on Canadian softwood are completely unwarranted and unfair. The lumber dispute dates back to the 1980s. 2 previous rounds of WTO cases from 2001 and 2006 concluded with an agreement that expired in 2015, prompting the Trump administration's tariffs.
Some bright spots in retail. First, people are loving their pandemic pizza. Papa John's says its North American sales are up 24% over the past 4 weeks, and sales jumped about the same percentage internationally. Pizza delivery is a long-time tradition that's thriving while many still stay close to home, as other restaurants struggle. Papa John's recently announced it's hiring 20,000 new workers to meet America's surging demand for pizza. And J.M. Smucker has raised its full-year targets after beating estimates for first quarter earnings. This comes off strong demand for its coffee, frozen sandwiches, and peanut butter from stuck-at-home consumers. The company's CEO says customers are spending more and coming back more often. Smucker says it plans to boost coffee production. A San Francisco-based flight tech startup reveals it successfully used its advanced autopilot system to take off, fly, and land a plane. That's as the company's CEO says it's a matter of months, not years, before the software hits the market.
Aviation startup X-Wing has been integrating and testing its auto-flight system on a single-engine Cessna cargo plane. The company aims to provide their software for planes carrying cargo to smaller regional airports. CTO Maxime Guerriel explained how the plane's detect and avoid feature is what sets their system apart from traditional autopilot.
Current aircraft have a lot of automation, which is flying to different waypoints, flying a trajectory, but they're not able to take off and land on their own. They're not able to taxi on their own. They're not able to automatically detect other aircraft and avoid them on their own.
During the demonstration, Guerriel took control of the plane from a seat behind the cockpit. He navigated through takeoff, changing altitude, adjusting the flight path, and eventually landing. Upon landing, a safety pilot retook control by pressing a red button on the yoke to taxi back to the hangar. According to the founder and CEO, Marc Piette, the technology would allow an operator to control the plane from an office on the ground.
We're at the dawn of a new era in aviation that's driven by autonomy, autonomous flight technology. It's something that's going to be, that we think is going to be as disruptive as the dawn of the jet age and what that did for long-distance travel.
X-Wing joins other aviation companies working on this kind of technology. European jet maker Airbus said in June it had completed a 2-year test program for its autonomous taxi, takeoff, and landing project.
Up next, the U.S. Deputy Secretary of State is set to meet Russia's foreign minister. High on their agenda is the political crisis in Belarus. And Christmas is still 4 months away, but Santas in the UK have already started their training. Santa's trainers have designed a special mask and have even found a way to maintain social distance. More on these after the break. Over to Europe, the Belarus political crisis has entered the third week. U.S. Deputy Secretary of State Stephen Biegun affirmed the U.S. commitment to the Belarusians' right to elect their own leaders and determine their own future. NTD UK's Neil Woodrow will bring us news from Europe.
Thanks, and welcome to the UK Newsroom, bringing you UK and European news. U.S. Deputy Secretary of State Stephen Biegun in Moscow to meet with the Russian Foreign Minister. High on their agenda is the political crisis in Belarus.
On his way to Moscow, U.S. Deputy Secretary Biegun stopped in Lithuania, where he visited exiled Belarusian opposition leader Svetlana Tikhanovskaya. There, Biegun affirmed U.S. commitment to the right of Belarusians to elect their own leaders and determine their own future. Belarus is the closest ally to Russia of all former Soviet republics. Russia sent journalists to staff Belarus State TV after workers there quit in protest against what they described as orders to broadcast propaganda. There have been widespread protests since President Alexander Lukashenko, known as Europe's last dictator, declared a landslide victory for his 6th term in office on August 9th. Tikhanovskaya fled the country and has been active in exile since. As Biegun arrived in Russia, she addressed the European Parliament.
In order to facilitate the transitional period, I have initiated a National Coordination Council comprised of all layers of Belarusian civic society and all sides of the political spectrum.
One goal of the council is to hold fresh elections with international observers. President Lukashenko called the council an illegal attempt to seize power, and prosecutors have started a criminal case against it. Tikhanovskaya finished her statement by saying, "Belarusian people deserve better. Europe deserves better."
Hong Kong pro-democracy activist Nathan Law is urging the international community to support Hong Kong and address human rights violations in China.
Law spoke to the media in Rome shortly before a meeting between Italian Foreign Minister Luigi Di Maio and Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi.
We need to address the human rights violation to China, even we have to engage with them, and we have to be very aware of their infiltration and their authoritarian expansionist nature.
Law, a former legislator, fled to London just before Hong Kong authorities issued arrest warrants for him and 5 other pro-democracy activists.
Yeah, I'm still very aware of my personal safety because we understand that Chinese reach could be very extensive.
The new national security law was imposed directly by Beijing, bypassing the Hong Kong legislature. It has been heavily condemned by Western governments, rights groups and activists in the territory.
Several countries have since suspended their extradition treaties with Hong Kong, including Britain, United States and most recently Germany. And British Foreign Secretary Dominic Raab met separately with Israel's leadership and Palestinian leaders to press for a new dialogue between the two countries. Raab met with Israeli Premier Benjamin Netanyahu and Foreign Minister Gabi Ashkenazi. Raab welcomed the agreement for normalizing relations between Israel and the UAE.
It is a first step towards a lasting peace, which can only ultimately be achieved through a two-state solution and negotiations on both sides.
Raab also met Palestinian counterpart Riyad al-Maliki and Prime Minister Mohammed Shtayyeh. Raab announced in a tweet that the UK is sending a $3.5 million aid package for vulnerable Palestinians. Germany is urging Greece and Turkey to solve their dispute over resource claims in the Eastern Mediterranean Sea.
German Foreign Minister HEIKO Maas visited Athens and Ankara to help diffuse tensions.
The current situation in the Eastern Mediterranean Sea has become very dangerous, and the smallest incident can lead to a catastrophe.
Maas urges the NATO allies to de-escalate the situation and get ready for dialogue.
Our message is that Germany and the entire European Union stand in firm solidarity with Greece.
Turkey and Greece both claim rights over energy resources found in the Mediterranean Sea, drawing the European Union and nearby countries into the dispute.
For the BBC's popular annual concert series at the Royal Albert Hall this year, it was decided to have a purely instrumental version for the famous 18th century song Rule Britannia. The decision was made because of the famous line, Rule Britannia, Britannia rules the waves, Britons never, never, never shall be slaves. Land of Hope and Glory will also not be sung. This spurred an unhappy response from many, including the Prime Minister.
I think it's time we stopped our cringing embarrassment about our history, about our traditions, and about our culture. And we stopped this general bout of self-recrimination and wetness. I wanted to get that off my chest.
This year's concert will take place with no audience and a smaller orchestra due to the CCP virus. Santas in the UK are training to be COVID-19 safe for Christmas.
Entertainment company Ministry of Fun has been running Santa School for 25 years. This year they're getting everyone together earlier than usual. They want to reassure the public that it's possible to make the experience safe during the pandemic. They created masks made of red velvet with white fur trim, just like Santa's costume.
We've created an ingenious method using a sleigh in which Santa puts the present on a sleigh, the child pulls a little string and pulls their present towards them.
And rest assured, the spirit of Christmas will not be affected.
We have to be a bit more distant from the children, and also the grown-up too, don't forget they're there as well. But the fun and the joy and the love and the magic will never change, has never changed and will never change.
Last year they had more than 1,000 bookings over 8 weeks for Santas. This year the books are half that number, but no matter the circumstances, Santa is ready for the season.
That's all for now. Thank you for watching. Back to the New York studio.
Still to come, a British botanic garden recreates a tour around the world, especially for visitors feeling isolated following lockdown. Catch a glimpse of the international display. And dogs and their owners compete in a race in Croatia. The events are part of the 4th annual Underdog Marathon. More on that when we return. A UK botanical garden is offering visitors a chance to see the world this summer. Despite the pandemic, the attraction's Travel the World Festival will showcase plants, landscapes, and architecture from around the world.
From tranquil Japanese landscapes to a fragrant Mediterranean garden to towering Californian redwood trees. Inside the UK's Royal Botanic Gardens at Kew, visitors can see it all. This summer, the gardens will showcase the international sights with a summer festival appropriately dubbed Travel the World.
And we've devised a wonderful trail which takes you to 10 different countries on 6 continents. So everywhere from the Mediterranean garden where we are now, to a Japanese tea garden, the Californian redwoods, and a South African mountaintop.
She explained the festival itself is a result of the pandemic and will help people who felt confined during the lockdown.
So we devised this festival, really, which would take you all around the gardens, and you would really feel that you had escaped and that you'd gone abroad and that you'd experienced all of these different places.
In addition to the international tour, visitors can glimpse other attractions, like this new botanical humpback whale sculpture. Artistic duo Andrew Whittle and Ryan Lange are behind the unique creation. The pair were recent winners of Netflix's floral design reality show, The Big Flower Fight. Andrew Whittle explained the piece was inspired by the way the whale species traverses the world on its migration route.
The belly of the whale's been described as a place of metamorphosis. We've all been kind of locked down, hunkered down at the minute, so it's this whole kind of rebirth as well.
The sculpture is made up of more than 700 plants used to imitate the colors and textures of a humpback whale. Some parts of it are also made from recycled materials. Despite the fact that Kew Gardens visitor numbers have been impacted by the pandemic and the drop in international travel, Botterill said more and more people staycationing now are paying the site a visit. The summer festival Travel the World at Kew and is expected to run until October 16th.
Dogs and their owners have come together for the 4th annual Underdog Marathon in Croatia. The best part, each pair competes as a team.
These dogs and their owners might look like they're heading to the beach for a casual stroll, but today there's a far tougher workout ahead. Monty's Beach is the location for this year's Underdog Marathon. The competition is now in its 4th year.
This year we had 24 participants, 3 winners, and of course we like to give a prize to the last one in, and this year we added another prize for the second to last.
The main event is a running and swimming race, but owners and their pooches compete together in a team of 2. Crossing the finish line first is MARIN Bogdan with his dog Nimbus.
My dog is a natural talent. He likes the sea, isn't afraid of jumping into the water, and he's a very strong swimmer. That's our advantage, and our strong side.
Next up is a beer drinking contest, followed by an ice cream eating race.
It's an opportunity for them to have a bonding experience, to socialize with other dog owners and dogs.
The dogs and owners in this year's race were mainly from Croatia, but organizers say they would love to encourage more international racers in the future. Montanari says just one owner had to be disqualified because he finished the race without his dog.
And that's all for today's news. Thanks for tuning in. I'm Jasmina Davis.